There was a time where it felt utterly inconceivable to think breeding would one day not have a place in the Pokemon series. It was a huge pillar of the franchise, an invaluable tool to competitive battlers and shiny hunters alike, and entire internet forums were filled with people offering their services to breed Pokemon with hidden abilities, apricorn balls or other unique circumstances. But more and more, it has started to seem like breeding is on its way out. And arguably, most surprisingly of all, I don't think many people really mind it at this point. Let's take a look at how breeding has gone from a series-defining staple to an afterthought that might very well be removed sooner rather than later. As you probably know, breeding made its grand introduction in Generation 2, Pokemon Gold and Silver. It was a huge selling point of the games in fact, with of course the inclusion of baby Pokemon only further driving that home, to the point everyone's favorite mascot even received one, as did Jigglypuff, another Pokemon that was hugely popular during the series' early days. Throughout the story of the game, the Mystery Egg plays a decently relevant part to nudge you into the direction of breeding as a mechanic, before you then finally encounter the daycare right in front of Goldenrod City. It is worth pointing out though that the idea of a daycare wasn't new, that it already existed in Gen 1. It was merely breeding that was a new addition, and one that the games don't actually explain all that much. In fact, there is not a single mainline Pokemon game out there that explains to you what the egg groups are. It's all information you're supposed to deduce yourself or find in second-hand sources. Anyway, just to very quickly summarize if you've truly never looked into this, but how breeding works is that you can receive an egg by putting two compatible Pokemon at the daycare. This egg will then hatch after a certain amount of steps, with the number of steps differing per Pokemon. What qualities the Pokemon inherits depends on who the father and the mother is, which allows you to even learn moves to Pokemon that naturally can't learn them, which is what egg moves are. As such, it gave you so much more control over your Pokemon than just catching them in the wild did. And as such, especially as the years continued and the concept of breeding was expanded, became an absolute essential part of the competitive battling scene. The level of control needed to min-max the perfect winning machine was only possible through the power of breeding, making it so essential that it was even retroactively added in Kanto when Fire Red and Leaf Green were released. But it wasn't just a haven for competitive battlers. Shiny hunters also swore by it. From the get-go, it was obviously by design for shiny Pokemon and breeding to be intrinsically linked. Not only did they both originate in Gen 2, but Crystal even directly hands you an egg with an increased shiny chance, the Odd Egg, as if to say, here, try out this mechanic if you want more differently colored Pokemon. And boy did people take Game Freak up on that. Starting in Gen 3, breeding became the shiny hunting method, and even though it was genuinely nothing more than biking in a straight line for hours and hours, it was simply the most effective method to obtain your desired shiny. And that was all because of the Masuda method, named after Junichi Masuda, co-founder of Game Freak, who turned this secret tech into widespread knowledge when he wrote about it on his blog to promote people using the GTS in Diamond and Pearl. But make no mistake, it was already a thing in Gen 3. If you bred two Pokemon of different lingual origin, the chances of the offspring being a shiny Pokemon were massively increased. Simply put, there was no way to get higher odds than that until much later in the series, and even then, getting complete control over which shiny you would obtain would literally not arrive until like Scarlet and Violet. The value of a foreign Ditto, as in not English, absolutely shot through the roof following this revelation, with people genuinely trading legendaries, which were not as commonly available back then as they are now, just to get a Ditto that spoke in a foreign tongue. I remember myself going on a German Pokemon forum and getting by with my basic high school level German, trying to get a Ditto from someone that didn't realize those babies were worth gold. I mean, to them it was just a normal Ditto after all. And as time progressed, breeding only became more and more important. Competitive battling grew in size and popularity, leading to only more people getting into breeding as a means of obtaining their desired powerhouse, while the games in turn gave you increasingly more control and the exact breeding mechanics were refined further. With the introduction of the shiny charm and the change to the shiny rates, shiny hunting only popularized further as well, and while mechanics like chain fishing did eventually grant you higher shiny chances than the Masuda method did, the complete level of control over which Pokemon you would obtain kept it on top as the most popular shiny hunting method, especially as online trading became even more popular and everyone could just get their hands on a foreign Ditto through the in-game marketplace rather than German Pokemon forums. And Game Freak started to play to it themselves as well. Don't get me wrong, daycares have never been located in strange corners of the maps or anything, but I don't know about you, but starting with X and Y, it felt like Game Freak was really saying, we get what you're doing here, have the longest straight path possible to bike up and down. But in hindsight, it does kind of feel like breeding peaked here, in Gen 6. Starting with Gen 8, Pokemon really started to embrace competitive battling to a serious degree. And with that came the realization that putting up a tremendous breeding border in order to allow people to dive into that side of Pokemon was maybe not ideal. Gen 6 and 7 already kinda did that with the introduction of super training, egg moves becoming easier to obtain through non-breeding means, and the introduction of the ability capsules, but breeding still very much had its worthwhile place. Then when Gen 8 arrived, breeding really got some heavy hits. Not only had Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee just become the first mainline Pokemon game since its introduction to not feature breeding at all, Sword and Shield also came with some heavy blows to breeding's past unique features. Egg moves could now be transferred between Pokemon without the need to breed an egg. All kinds of items were introduced to allow you the same level of control breeding used to give, except now to be used on any Pokemon you wanted, and even the leveling up purpose of the daycare took heavy hits, with the widely available EXP candy being introduced. Basically put, unique cases aside, breeding no longer was needed to participate in competitive battling starting with Sword and Shield, which is ironic since Galar is actually the only region to have 2 daycares. It shows that from a design perspective, Game Freak still took breeding very seriously. And hey, perhaps that was because they knew beforehand that the Masuda method would remain the objectively best way to obtain shiny Pokemon. Apricornmons, not so much, with how much more widely available Apricorn Balls became in Gen 8, but for shiny hunting, this method still had the best odds. But even then, it was becoming clear the writing was on the walls. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee had introduced overworld shinies and they had instantly become a favorite, to the point people were shocked Sword and Shield didn't have it. It was becoming clear though that with the way Sword and Shield handled wild encounters that it was only a matter of time before random wild mon would no longer appear and overworld shinies would become the new norm, at which point that would far eclipse the Masuda method as the better hunting method. Add to that not every Pokemon could be added to Sword and Shield following Dexit, meaning that if that favorite you were planning to shiny hunt for hours was unavailable, you were just flat out of luck, and it became more and more clear that breeding was losing the purpose it had proudly held for decades. And then came Scarlet and Violet. After Legends Arceus similarly had not had a daycare, just like Let's Go, as well as brought back overworld shinies, making them easier to collect than ever before, the new generation of Pokemon followed in its steps. Overworld shinies were here to stay, becoming the new shiny hunting meta, and as a true nail in the coffin, Paldea also does not have a daycare. It does still have breeding though, now available through picnics, meaning that for the first time in the entire series, breeding works differently. Gone is the breed egg, hatch egg, breed egg loop, with instead you now receiving a bunch of eggs through just chilling in your picnic, which you can then hatch afterwards. It's definitely not as smooth as it was before, that's for sure, and yet I can't say I have heard too many people complain about it. And that probably has to do with how obsolete breeding has frankly become. No one needs to frequently breed anymore. Sure, maybe a competitive battler occasionally needs it for a zero-speed Pokemon, or a shiny hunter wants a shiny Sprigatito, which can only be obtained via Masuda method still. But the concept of people just breeding and hatching eggs for hours on end for whatever purpose has completely vanished. It's an incredible fall from grace for what was once a core element of the Pokemon franchise, but now it feels everyone just kinda agrees it's better this way. Sure, it'd be nice if breeding was a bit smoother, but what we have today is simply more convenient for competitive battlers or more fun and engaging for shiny hunters. We have long passed the point to say breeding is falling, honestly. Within the span of like 1, maybe 2 generations, breeding has gone from being on tap to becoming borderline obsolete. But if you are still a loyal breeder, I don't think you need to worry about it truly disappearing just yet. It still has its purposes that are unique to it, even if the number of them has greatly decreased. And I don't think it's such a strain on the development team that they'd free up a ton of time by removing it. That said though, I think it is undeniable we could do without. As long as it's few unique niches, for example, being able to create multiple of rare Pokemon like starters or regional forms, the ability to get them on with 0 speed for Trick Room teams, or simply turning that Metagross you caught into a Beldum for your Pokedex are replaced, we don't really need Pokemon breeding anymore. Especially if the cost of the other methods is brought down, because currently things like mints or Herba Mystica cost resources, whereas breeding is free and you pay with your time. But yeah, we might be going into a generation where the idea of a Pokemon egg may be one for the past. It feels crazy to potentially leave behind such an iconic and recognizable image of the Pokemon series, but it may actually be the future sooner rather than later. How would you feel about that? And how do you feel about the current state of breeding in general? Are you happy we're moving on, or do you miss the golden age? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.